Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unlocking Nature, a platform brought to you by Leadership for Conservation in Africa. My name is Salete Sitiki, and I am going to be your host for this evening's event. But before we get on with today's business, I'd like to share with you that we are currently live from Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town, South Africa. And I would like to thank Two Oceans Aquarium for allowing us to use their venue, and special thanks to Jeanette for welcoming us so warmly. So tonight's talk is titled Ocean Speaks, Stories of Wonder, Agency and Hope. And taking us through, it's Pavitray Pillay and Sarah Ferguson. Now I'm going to quickly introduce our first speaker, Pavitray Pillay, a trailblazing marine scientist and the manager of the WWF-SASSI program, who has dedicated her life to ocean conservation and sustainability. With a passion ignited by childhood curiosity and fueled by determination, Pav has broken barriers and defied expectations to become a leading voice in marine science and conservation. Everyone, join me to welcome Pav as she takes the screen. Johan, Pav, the screen is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome, Pavs.
Thank you, Johan.
Great. It's good to look forward to this conversation. But before we do that, if you want to ask any questions regarding the fish behind us, just drop it in the chat, and we will attend to it through the evening. We've got a panel of experts here, starting right here, that can attend to your questions. So it would be great if you can come up with some interesting questions, and if you want to know which fish is which, this is your time to ask. So Pavs, tell us a little bit about yourself. I've heard that your story started far away from the water.
Yes, absolutely. So surprise, surprise, I actually grew up in Pretoria.
Wow.
In a little dorpie on the west of Pretoria called Lodium, and in a very traditional Indian family. So a family that believed, I use this line quite often, a family that believed in only 5 careers: doctors, lawyers, chartered accountants, teachers, or failure. So you get that. When I said I wanted to be a marine biologist, it didn't fit in any of those categories. And I must admit, my first introduction to the sea was David Attenborough's Our Planet. And that was those old televisions where you actually had to get up and change the channel, as opposed to using
And you never changed the channel.
And I never changed the channel. And National Geographic magazines that my dad would get at the second-hand shop. And I just fell in love with this mysterious world below the waters. It's, from the kelp forest to coral reefs, the vast amounts of fish, the fact that, tuna travel kilometers upon kilometers, they traverse all the oceans to get from point A to point B, giant whales, dolphins. I mean, dolphins are every little girl's dream, and I always used to say to my dad that narwhals were the unicorns of the sea. And I got to a spot where I finally said to my parents, I'm going to Cape Town to study marine biology. And my father said to me, well, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back to Pretoria and work in a bank. But I got to UCT, and I was very lucky to get into the marine biology honors. And I fell in love with marine biology. I finished up a master's, and then I just continued in this trajectory around trying to both protect, conserve, and sustainably utilize our oceans.
So your father sounds like a very wise man, giving you the alternative of the bank to this.
Exactly.
That worked out very well.
Yeah.
So if you would talk to a young student like yourself, that's maybe in a landlocked country like Rwanda or Swaziland or Lesotho or Gauteng, and what would you say to them? Why go this direction as opposed to become a game ranger in the Kruger Park?
Sure. So people very often, when they think about the ocean, only think about consumption. So can I eat something from the sea? But very often they forget how important sea actually is to our survival as a species, whether you're at the coast or whether you're inland. And on Tuesday, we got to watch the David Attenborough's My Oceans, which he released on his 99th birthday. And he prefaced the whole movie by saying he's been making movies for 99 years. And now he's finally realized that the one environment that will save humanity is the sea. And he goes on to explain that the sea gives us more than food. And that's what I would say to anybody that doesn't engage every day with the sea. The sea drives our planet. The sea provides enough oxygen, probably more oxygen than most of the terrestrial trees. So for those of you who don't realize, when you look at phytoplankton, that greeny color is actually chlorophyll. So it takes in carbon dioxide, which we release as human beings, and it pops out oxygen. Same photosynthetic process as trees. So it's 2/3 of what you actually breathe is coming from the ocean. The ocean also probably transports everything. Most of the things you wear, you eat, you consume, your homes, it has traveled by sea. We always laugh and say a lot of your products have probably traveled more across the sea than you will ever as a human being. The ocean creates millions and millions of jobs. And 3 billion people rely on it, from livelihoods to consumption. Okay? And one thing, the ocean is going to be our savior for carbon dioxide. Because it is the biggest sequestrator of carbon dioxide, of greenhouse gases, than any other biome. So it locks CO2 and actually sinks it down. So the Southern Ocean, which happens to be on our coast of South Africa, is one of the biggest carbon sinks. Now, you want to be able to drop that temperature because we never want to hit 2 degrees because of the impacts of that climate. So whether you live in Gauteng or whether you live in Cape Town, you are going to be impacted by climate change. The ocean is going to be our savior.
If you have to grade the ocean's capacity to mitigate climate change at the moment, where would you put it, and how can we improve on that?
So I'd probably put it as number 1, purely because the ocean is the biggest system that we have on the planet, right? It's also the one system that can absorb so much, as much CO2 as most other biomes. We're cutting down the Amazon and big terrestrial biomes at a rate that it cannot happen. So deforestation is a big problem. We're removing mangroves, which is the other biome that takes up CO2, and we're putting up prawn farms. So you understand the logic there. So the ocean is the one untapped resource that will help humanity deal with climate. And we got to protect it. So, you know, we definitely have to look at how we consume from the ocean. Because I always tell children, you must think of the ocean and all the species as a beautiful house with all the bricks different colors. And those represent different species. If you take out too many bricks, your house falls down. We call that ecosystem collapse. The same thing happens in the ocean. You've got to take less and give more and allow it to regenerate. The amazing thing about the ocean, lift a little bit of pressure and it kicks back. It is one of the fastest recovering ecosystems we know. So we've got to look after it in terms of what we eat, how we treat it, where we put our garbage. So our plastic and our pollutants and our factory effluent. We've got to look after it in terms of how we use those. You know, unnecessarily damming, unnecessary chemical spillages, removing big top predators. They are pivotal to how an ecosystem functions. You know, your big sharks don't need to eat whales and sharks. We need to be careful about how we remove other species so we don't kill those top predators. They serve a very important function in stabilizing ecosystems. You know, even something as simple as when you go to the beach, be cognizant of what you take and take it back with you. We have to ensure that we help curb our carbon. So lots of people say, oh, but how does carbon dioxide and increased temperatures affect the sea? Well, in 2 ways. You're preventing a system that actually locks in carbon. You're preventing that engine from working, A. B, by increasing atmospheric temperature, you actually cause the ice caps to melt. Now, I know what you're going to say, the ice caps are like thousands of kilometers away from us. Why should I bother? Well, what lots of people don't know is that the ice caps is fresh water. It's not salt water. And if I gave you a glass of salt water and I kept adding fresh water, what happens to the glass of salt water? It gets less salty. Now, the ocean is based on a biogeochemical system. And the chemistry and the temperature basically run how the ocean moves, how it converges, how currents move, how the ocean travels across every single point of our globe. Change the chemistry, you change the way the water works. You will change. Now, fish live in a spot, as we said, fish live here because it's cold and they like the temperature. Two things happen when fish don't like where you're living anymore because you've changed it. They either move or they die. Now, we're dependent on fish, as I said, for consumption, but also to stabilize those ecosystems. So it's so vitally important that our actions, in a way that we actually look after the sea, rather than damage the sea.
How can we assist the ocean in coping with climate change?
Well, first of all, assist the ocean by sustainable consumption. You have to be very cognizant, have an informed decision-making process when you eat seafood. We talked about red-listed species, orange-listed species, green-listed species. Make sure you're choosing from the green list. Be conscious about your consumption. Don't eat fish all the time. I mean, I remember as a child, you would never see sushi in a retailer. Now you can get sushi from Pick n Pay, Spa, Woolworths, just about anywhere. So our consumption is stripping the ocean bare. Okay, so be cognizant of how much seafood we eat, and more importantly, what seafood we eat as well. There's far too many species on the red list and far too few species on the green list. So think about your consumption. Think about your plastic consumption. I often use this analogy because it makes so much sense in my head. And it can be for any single-use plastic. Our lives are littered with plastic, literally. But it's the single-use ones that are a problem. So there's a very good adage that says, it's just one straw, followed by, said 8 million people. Then it's not one straw, it's 8 billion straws. And they always end up in the sea. So, be very, very conscious about your single-use plastic. We can't get away from plastic. It's cheap, it's versatile, it's colorful, it bends, it folds, it's in our laptops, it's in our cell phones. But those are not single items. So shift your behavior patterns away from single-use items. WWF Singapore did a really interesting exercise where they said that even the smallest piece of plastic could probably have a lifespan of 400 years in the sea. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has said that every single plastic we ever produced is still on the planet and still in the system. Because plastic is not a natural material. So watch your plastic consumption. Understand what you need. Do not take polystyrene to the beach. Because what do you do with polystyrene when you're sitting on the beach? You chip it. And then you've got microplastics. So you're making the problem worse, in South Africa, we need to be cognizant of how often we drive. I know we have a power issue. We are very dependent on fossil fuels, and we haven't got certain infrastructure that can shift us to either renewables or to a better public transport. But you can make those conscious decisions, about when you go out, how far you travel, doing one shopping rather than multiple trips, things like that. So you can make small lifestyle changes that actually have amplified impact in terms of the oceans.
Can I put you a little bit on the spot?
Sure.
You've spoken about our individual responsibility to take plastic out of the system. Isn't there a bit more of a responsibility on corporate South Africa to also come to the party?
Absolutely. So if you look at what we call the plastic mitigation hierarchy, the first one is reduction. Reduce, 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 not recycle. Recycle is a last resort, and that's where you and I sit. It has to start from the industry level. Reduce our plastic consumption, particularly plastics that are not recyclable, particularly plastics that cannot be repurposed. The other way is shift from this linear system. We are asking the industry, the fossil fuel industry, the plastics industry, and the corporates, the retail industry, the brand owner, the manufacturing industry, develop plastics that stay in the system, create circular systems with plastic. We've got enough plastic in the system that can last for a very long time. You don't need to produce virgin plastic. Yet, virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled. That is a problem. So we need to change those systems. We need to be able to use plastic, get it repaired, repurposed, reused again, changed its form and shape. I mean, it's such a versatile material. So we can shift that system. We don't have to constantly put in virgin plastic. And that is our call to industry. Reduce, recycle, repair, change, go into circularity. So not just take what we call take, make, and waste, but actually a circular system that allows the plastic to stay in the system for a long, long time, many, many years in plastic space.
Perhaps you have a friend that come and visit you all the time.
It's a red stump nose. I don't know where it is.
It just went away for a moment, but it tends to come and sit here on your shoulder.
It's red listed by the way.
That was my question.
He's trying to make a point.
It's me you should protect.
Exactly.
So for the person upstream from the ocean, can you make the link between the person sitting in Bloemfontein and conservation in the ocean? How are the two linked?
Well, first of all, the person sitting in Bloemfontein probably consumes more seafood than you and I, of course. So that's the one thing. So when you're choosing to eat seafood, make a smart choice. Download the SASSI app, look at what's sustainable, and choose from the green list. Easy peasy. The orange list is a list where we ask you to think twice. So what we're saying there is they're not disappearing, but they're under so much pressure already. So don't eat them all the time. Eat them some of the time. So make smart purchasing choices, make smart consumption choices. So that's immediately a very easy way of how you can start being an ocean champion, just by being good about how you consume. The other ones, all rivers lead to the sea. Every single river leads to the sea. So when you throw your junk around, when you pollute, when we have litter issues, when we don't recycle, when plastic bags break, they get into water systems get to the sea. So eventually, even a plastic bag that was dropped on Bloemfontein will end up in the ocean. Be cognizant of that. So put in place systems where you can, sort its source, get to a recycling center, challenge your retailers. The two superpowers every South African has is your wallet and your voice. If you don't buy it, they won't sell it. And if you say something about it, they'll have to listen because they want your wallet. So, even in Gauteng or in Bloemfontein, you can do these small changes that affect what is happening in the oceans. And the last one is everybody goes to the sea. Well, most people go to the sea during the holidays, right? You're in a different province, you're close to the sea. It is important that you respect that environment. The oceans is a fantastic facility to come to. Shaka Marine World in Durban. So you can increase your awareness. You can get up to speed with what I can and can't do, what I shouldn't be doing, and why the ocean protects me. I mean, we have the saying, which is, we kind of talk about it, the WWF. What you do above the water, no matter where you are, has a massive impact to what happens below the water. And that's what people need to realize. The other thing, which a lot of people don't think about, and we've kind of done a bit of work, and we see more and more papers published about, is about human well-being in the sea. The movement we're seeing about mental illness and needing green and blue spaces, and needing clean green and blue spaces, where you can go and you can kind of de-stress and meditate. And being in those green and blue spaces actually helps with mental well-being. South Africa has a legacy of fishing in the oceans for many, many years. And a lot of people don't know that it's actually tied. My friend's back. Hello. But what lots of people don't know is that we have a strong cultural history and heritage tied to the sea, and not just fishing. They're traditional indigenous folk that have the most beautiful tales about the oceans and the experiences, their spiritual tie to the sea, their cultural tie to the sea. Indian people have a cultural tie to the sea in KZN. You'll often see them making offerings to the sea. I recently met an indigenous storyteller from the Eastern Cape, and she said to me, do you know that the word for the oceans and waters is uwandle? I said, yes, I do. It means water. She said, no, it doesn't. I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, uwandle comes from the same set of nouns as ubuntu, which in ubuntu, I am because you are. Uwandle means I am because the sea is.
Wow.
So, to talk about that connection, so whether you're sitting in Bloemfontein or you're sitting in Cape Town, doesn't matter. We have a tie, a spiritual connection to the blue spaces that surround the planet.
That's deep insight. Let's zoom out for a moment and think big blue picture. How would you, if you could change something about conservation, what would you change?
Conservation in general or conservation in the oceans?
General. How should we think different? Because things are changing.
Yeah, I think one thing that I really want, conservation needs to evolve beyond being something out there. We live with it. You know, I assimilate it. Oh, I hate traffic. I hate traffic. Well, you are traffic. You don't forget, you are traffic. So you are conservation. We have to have a living landscape. We have to have a living seascape where we are part of that ecosystem. We've taken ourselves out of it. You know, you're not an alien driving a show. You are part of the show. So become part of the conservation practices. Put in place protected areas. Put in place other measures besides putting a fence around something. You know, look at how do we protect the areas? How do we sustainably utilize resources? How do we live in harmony with nature? Look at nature-based solutions. You know, we have to think that big, broad scale around nature-based solutions. We can't anymore say, well, we're just going to continue business as usual. You know, because the cost of inaction is scary. And we don't have that privilege going forward. Especially, we already saw we've hit 1.6 degrees last year. And we've seen the impacts. We have about 4,000 climate-related crises. And we can now directly link them to climate. So we know we have to do something. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's happening to us right now. We've seen floods, we've seen fires, we've seen unbelievably weird weather. You know, we're seeing food shortages, we're seeing massive water issues, water insecurity. Those are all part of the fact that we don't live with nature. And conservation needs to evolve to be beyond living outside of nature. We need to start living with nature. We need to have this, I like to think of it as a quilted blanket in which conservation forms very part of society. And we start living that. We need to bring in communities indigenous knowledge, how we fish, how we farm. We have to farm with nature. Can't farm, we can't produce food the way we currently do, whether it's fishing, whether it's farming. You know, agriculture is the biggest environmental footprint of any other production system. We've got to change the way we produce food, we've got to change the way we consume food. You know, otherwise we really are heading for disaster.
And if you think specifically about the ocean, what would you change about conservation related to the ocean?
Well, very much the same. I mean, fishermen love to fish. It's been passed down through family. You can't ask a fisherman to go and become a farmer. It's not going to work, right? So how do we work with fishermen? How do we employ responsible fishing practices? How do we put pressure on big fishing companies to start acting responsibly? How do we stop destructive fishing? Like, really just say, guys, we can't keep doing this. It's very much. We need to protect areas, so marine protected areas that are properly managed and enforced. Brilliant. Let's just protect those areas and no takes on, but then nobody polices it, nobody enforces it, no compliance, so they're fishing in the area. One thing the marine environment has shown us over years, lift a little bit of pressure, it bounces back. So, you know, enforce those rules, look at protection, but look, a place doesn't have to be a complete no-take zone. You can have seasonality, you can have small-scale fishers that can access it, but not large-scale fishing, commercialized fishing. You can look at recreational fishers, you can look at artisanal fishing. You can design a system for the oceans that will work. You can say, look, no fishing of sharks. That's it. No fishing of sharks. I mean, we have a very small shark fishery in South Africa. We don't need it because no South Africans eat shark. We export all of it to Australia. It's called chips and flake.
So you just said it's possible.
Yep.
So why is it not being done?
Oh, because the proxy is the dollar, unfortunately. And we need to find ways, because the transition has to be just. It has to take everybody with. So you mustn't jeopardize livelihoods. You need to consider livelihoods, jobs, people's households, income. You know, you also need, one of the difficult things is to deal with greed. So we export 50% everything we catch in South Africa. and we import cheap, junky fish from Russia and Argentina and Patagonia. I mean, I don't know when last you've eaten calamari from South Africa. But if you go to Spain, Portugal, tons of South African calamari. Why? Because of the rand-dollar exchange. It is more beneficial to export our produce and our products and our fish than it is to keep it locally. So build resilient local supply chains. And that takes reframing business. That takes, business rethinking. And initially, there's going to be trade-offs. And you're going to see a bit of a decline, but you'll bend the curve, you'll swing it up. And nobody's willing to invest in that time. And I think we need a few examples where we see that uptick that actually becomes possible. I mean, there are countries that have done it. We've seen island states that have done it. We've seen Singapore do it. We've seen some of the Asian countries do it, Korea, etc. So we know we have working models. We just have to be brave and bold enough in South Africa to take those steps.
Are there African models where it's really working?
There's been one or two in Kenya. There's been a few amazing ones in the global south, so Chile, Peru. I've seen some really fantastic examples, especially around smallholders, small-scale fishers, big community movements. There was one recently, I think it was in Cameroon, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So there are definitely examples, and we need to build it. And something we talk often about is it's not just a matter of scaling up, it's scaling deep, where you actually involve local communities, where you consider jobs, where you consider people's livelihoods, their culture, their well-being, and you look at it as a good life for everybody.
The canary in the coal mine of the ocean is probably the penguin, Jeanette's babies.
Yes.
Are they going to make it, the African penguin?
I hope to God they do. For now, not so much. So it's the penguin, it's the Cape cormorant, it's the black cormorant, all these canaries, quite ironic to call them canaries, these canaries in the coal mine, they are showing us that the southern Benguela is in trouble. And if you look at the southern Benguela, it's where most of our major fisheries occur, right? So it's going to start impacting us when that southern Benguela collapses, because we love eating fish as South Africans, right? We export, it helps drive our GDP. So we need to be very cognizant that the plight of the penguin extends far greater than just losing a very iconic bird. Yes, it's losing a top predator, but it also will show the big point in terms of what is happening in our oceans. And that's the worry. So we have to look at it as what we call it ecosystems-based approach to fisheries management. You can't just have a single species management. And you can't manage one species. It's impossible. The ocean, you don't put a net down and go, right, today I'm catching only hake, and all the hake say, right, we jump into the net. Doesn't work like that. So you need an ecosystems-based approach to fisheries management. You need an ecosystem-based to how we manage oceans, period. You can't look at it individually. You can't look at it separately. It has to be a very network. You need government, you need industry, you need retailers, you need everyday South Africans, all of us pulling together in the same direction to be able to address that. And we've seen small islands do it. We've seen some of the countries do it, that have half the size of the ocean that we have. But at the same time, we've seen the other side of the point, very highly exploitative behaviors, and we need the right law enforcement. That is the problem as well. We need to be able to have hard and fast rules around people that overexploit and overfish and overconsume. And we need to be able to make examples of that.
Pavs, thank you so much. I saw Lorette asking for time, or are we still good to go?
Sarah.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to switch over to Sarah now. Just before we do that, I just want to thank the Two Oceans Aquarium again for sponsoring the space tonight. It's really fantastic to be able to present from here, to bring you this live. And indeed, one can get addicted to this.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Pav, for such a detailed talk. Very inspiring. Now, moving on to our second speaker, Sarah Ferguson, a passionate physiotherapist, motivational speaker, and ocean advocate, with her impressive background as a national swimmer and swim coach. Sarah has taken her love for the ocean to new depths. pioneering ocean swims and using her platform to raise awareness about single-use plastic pollution. Is an ambassador for Plastic Oceans International and founder of Breathe Conservation. Sarah's achievements are as inspiring as they are numerous, including recent world first swims and Guinness World Records. Get ready to be motivated by her story and learn about her tireless efforts to protect our oceans for future generations. Sarah, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can you all hear me? It's a privilege to be here this evening, speaking to people from all over the world and including Africa as well. We recently just celebrated World Ocean Day, which is a day that was originally founded by the Canadian International Centre for Ocean Development at a UN conference 33 years ago. Recently, as you heard earlier, Sir David Attenborough has just released a film called Ocean, where he says this: "This could be the moment of change. Nearly every country on earth has just agreed, on paper, to achieve this bare minimum and protect a third of the ocean. Together, we now face the challenge of making it happen." 2 years ago, I found myself alone, 80 kilometers offshore, surrounded by water that was over 3,000 feet deep. I had never before been so far away from land. The boat ride to get there was a long, wet, bumpy journey of over 2 hours as we searched for one of the world's fastest ocean currents. The Esgullis Current is like a raging river. It has a width that varies between 100 and 200 kilometers and flows along the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal along South Africa towards the Cape. Its speeds range as fast as 9 kilometers or 6 miles an hour. It's very, very fast. And it is one of scientists' biggest challenges to try and figure out that how to find it and how it works. And despite having a team of experts, satellite imagery, and very experienced watermen on the job, we still got it wrong more often than we got it right. We would spend hours every day trying to find this elusive current. And those constant changes in which direction we were swimming, how far I would manage to swim in a day, trying to find an exit route for the boat to safely land, along with a 3 to 5 hour return boat ride in choppy, bumpy, windy water, were the things that took its toll on me and my team. And once we'd finally found this fast Esgullis current, it was an incredibly liberating and almost haunting experience. To look around and see nothing but water around you makes you realize very quickly how small we are in this world. The water was a mesmerizing blue. At times it was purple with sun rays dancing like fire through the water. I sensed a freedom that I had never experienced before, as well as a deep sense of vulnerability. I was surrounded by marine life. Whales, dolphins, pilot whales had greeted us on our boat ride out to get to that 80-kilometer mark. And once I dived into the water to start swimming, I heard and felt the sound of whale song vibrate deep within my soul. Within a few minutes, a school of golden manta ray floated underneath me, followed by a skittish hammerhead shark. And not long after that, there was a pod of dolphins that were around us. It was magical. But then my team abandoned me to investigate a possible whale trapping. I was left all alone amongst all this wildlife in the middle of the ocean, very far away from land. I felt so exposed, but at the same time, being submerged in nature like that was invigorating. And being in nature is one of the things I love most in this world. The wilder, the better, and the more alive I feel. What an incredible privilege to be able to swim so far out to sea with these magnificent marine creatures. And one of the most common things I see and feel are very many different types of jellyfish. I call them stingies a lot of the time because they don't always look like jellyfish. But they entertain me and mesmerize me and hurt me at times. But when I stop to just contemplate the complexity and vast variety of jellyfish and stingy things, I'm blown away. And these are often considered annoyances. Did you know that jellyfish have been in our oceans for over 500 million years? And 95% of their makeup is water. Some of them are even able to turn back their biological clock. Now that's something all humans wish they could do. I've been privileged to swim all over the world in some really exquisite and beautiful places with incredible marine life. The world is beautiful, the ocean is magnificent, but we have messed it up with our overconsumption and negligence. And I believe that it is our mandate to steward the earth and help restore it to how God created it to be. We all know by now the global crisis of plastic pollution. We heard it firsthand from Pavs. The science is coming out rapidly with the stats of plastic in humans, in our brain, in human semen, in placenta, in breast milk. And the fact that most humans probably consume up to a credit card's worth of plastic in a year. How much more science do we actually need in order to actually create change? Plastic is everywhere and it is affecting everything and everyone, and it has severe health consequences. Recent research is coming out with how plastic affects ADHD or causes ADHD, certain cancers, possible gender confusion, and many things still to be revealed. 6 years ago, I went on a mission to figure out where in the world is the most plastic. And I did a lot of research, and I spoke to scientists and nonprofits all over the world and came across this tiny island in the middle of the South Pacific. And I was flabbergasted. How can this remote island so far away from any land have the highest concentration of microplastics in the world? Easter Island was the island that I found, and it is situated between Chile and New Zealand in the South Pacific. And because of the South Pacific gyre, it basically accumulates ocean trash and spits it up onto the nearest landmass, which happens to be Easter Island. And at first glance, the beaches are pristine. But on closer inspection, as you start picking up pebbles, you start to unveil millions and trillions of tiny pieces of microplastics, none of which are from the island itself. It's like you going home today, opening your front door, and finding somebody else's rubbish in your living room. It is not yours, you don't even litter, and yet you have to live in that mess. And that is what it is like for our marine life, and that is what it is like for the people on this island. It is not theirs, and it is not fair. So I took it upon myself to attempt to swim around this little island, to make a statement. No one had ever successfully swum around the island before, and it was my goal to be the first. One man had attempted it and failed due to dehydration and severe exhaustion. After 26 hours of trying, he was airlifted out to the nearest hospital in Chile on the mainland for medical care. I spent 3 months preparing for that swim, assembled a team, and flew over to the big unknown. I had a statement to make, and I was prepared to give my all in order to do so. The salinity on Easter Island was next level. I found myself within half an hour of starting that swim, taking chunks of Vaseline and trying to coat my mouth so that it did not penetrate. It was like this chemical taste in my mouth. And after a few hours, it caused my throat to swell so much that I had difficulty breathing and swallowing. That swim was so tough. It was one of the toughest I've ever done. And there was nothing to see, and there was this constant salt in my mouth that made it impossible for me to disassociate from where I was. It was a long, hard slog, and even my coach battled to cheer me up with her usual antics. Was it worth it to put myself through all that torture and discomfort? Absolutely. During my swim, there was a team of people from the island and from other organizations that picked up 350 kilograms of microplastics in an hour and a half. And when I saw that plastic on the beach after my swim, I felt sick to my stomach. And if it would make a difference, I would do that swim again 1,000 times. People we do not know are being affected by our waste and negligence. The matter is urgent, and if we can't see that, then we have a massive problem. I'm going to share a video with you now, which will show you the reality of this problem on a much more intimate level. The following footage, which I'm about to reveal to you, was taken during the sardine run along the east coast of South Africa that I had the privilege of experiencing a few years ago. It is one of Earth's greatest migrations, which happens when the sardines get pushed up the coast from the colder waters to the warmer waters because of seasonal winds, and it creates this feeding frenzy where you've got sharks, whales, dolphins, and marine birds all coming together, uniting in this crazy feeding frenzy. And if you're not sure of what you're seeing there and hearing there, you're hearing the sound of whales under the water. There's a bait ball, there's birds diving in, and there's a lot of plastic in the water. And this experience still haunts me today. I was in this most magnificent setting, surrounded by nature at its best, doing what it does best, but with the tragic reality of what our convenient culture has created, taking away from the purity of nature. I've done many swims since this, all over the world and a lot locally, and I'm busy slowly trying to make my way along the coast of Southern Africa from Mozambique to Cape Town. Last year, I got to swim around the island of Maui in Hawaii with a group of swimmers from all over the world. Over 15 swimmers were represented from various countries around the world. And we swam together as part of a swim called Epic Swim Maui to create awareness for ocean health, combining science and nature and local communities to really try and spread a message around why our oceans are important. And they did some tests in the water and the air to look for microplastics, and all of those came back positive. But despite all this doom and gloom, I do believe there is hope. And as I mentioned, I've been blessed to swim in places all over the world, and yet nothing beats the breathtaking wild beauty of South Africa, my own country. Hawaii is a close second, but the wildness and variety of marine life in South Africa is something so, so special, which is one of the reasons why I'm trying to swim along our coast to try and help create awareness about the importance of protecting it. I mean, where else in the world can you swim in the tropics of Sodwana Bay and Aliwal Shoal, which are arguably on a par with the Great Barrier Reef for diving in Australia? And then a few hours later, you can be cold water plunging in the majestic kelp forests of the Cape. In between, you have the wild coast of the Transkei, home to one of the greatest migrations of Earth that I mentioned with the sardine run, full of marine biodiversity that is hard to beat. And to swim with whales and sharks and birds swooping overhead, dolphins, squid and pilot whales, and be part of the turtle migration in the fast, warm Agulhas current is something of a novelty that only a very few people get to experience. There are amazing organizations doing fabulous work to try and clean up our oceans and educate others to change their behavior. There's Ocean Pledge in Cape Town and I'm Water, which are working with young kids doing snorkel experiences, educating kids to pledge to change their behavior, and working with local and corporate communities. We've got Litterboom in Durban, South Africa, and in Cape Town, which are putting in booms across the rivers to try and stop plastic from entering the sea. They can stop it from the river level. It will really help our oceans. And I've started my own nonprofit organization, which is called Breathe, And our motto is to live deeply and tread lightly. We have a marine ecology program where we teach rural grade 6s in schools on the importance of marine ecology and conservation. And this is so rewarding and so important because these kids are our future. We can get them to really understand and unlock nature, as this is all about. Then we really do have a good positive future and a hope. We've also started a Bring Your Own Cup campaign in partnership with Lizard and the Coffee magazine locally and here in South Africa, which is really encouraging coffee shops and individuals to bring their own cup and not take a disposable cup. We've had this past weekend, in honor of World Oceans Day, our annual fundraiser, which is now South Africa's biggest ocean open water swim event, where we made this a plastic-free event. We had no water bottles that were disposable. Everyone had to bring their own one to fill up. We had no coffee cups except bring your own cup. And it really just was trying to show other events that this can be done. We don't need to have disposable things at these events. And we were partnering with local organizations in that program. We also run monthly reef cleanups where we bring people together to show them firsthand what's in and under the ocean. So we snorkel along the local reef here in Durban, seeing direct impact of litter as well as beautiful fish and coral life. And last year at the United Nations finally recognized the immensity of the plastic problem and founded the first ever World Cleanup Day. I was invited to be the inaugural keynote speaker at their first event, which was held in Tromsø, Norway, where I got to challenge local and global communities and authorities how important and urgent it is to change our ways. The recent Sir David Attenborough's film, The Ocean, says this: "After living for nearly 100 years on this planet, I now understand that the most important place on earth is not on land, but at sea. And if we save the sea, we save the world." This is a massive problem that cannot be solved by one crazy swimmer or even one tiny nonprofit. But as Mother Teresa says, none of us, including me, can ever do great things. But we can all do small things with great love, and together we can do something wonderful. So what can we do about this problem? How can we help continue to build momentum and the sense of urgency? For me personally, I started with my love and talent of swimming, and to use that to create a statement and a platform to speak out against this topic and create change. I then started Breathe, my nonprofit, to try and involve and empower local communities to start to change their behavior. And I'm going to finish off with a little acronym which will hopefully help you to really start your journey to changing so that we can together create sustainable change. And it's one that should be quite easy to remember because it's SAVE. And we want to save our oceans, we want to save our planet. And S starts for to start. So just start by doing some research, figuring out what you're passionate about around environmentalism, around nature, research into local organizations that are doing work, follow people who are actively activating against this topic, and find your area of interest and influence. A stands for ACT. Once you've found a worthy organization that you want to join or support, or even a specific issue that you find interesting, act out by researching that relevant field. Join an organization, send an email, make a phone call, but just start actively following that topic with interest. V stands for volunteer, and this is not just necessarily volunteering your time to come to cleanups or attend events, but it's actually about volunteering your services. When I started Breathe, I had no idea what it meant to have a nonprofit. I'm still floundering my way, but I'm getting there slowly. But we rely heavily on people with expertise to help us in our running of our nonprofit. I've got a financial services provider that offer their financial services to us for free because I don't know how to run that kind of thing. People are always looking for help with fundraising, people who are good at marketing and networking. A lot of people who start nonprofits don't have a network of people with money. So you can offer your services that way. E stands for eliminate. And I want to challenge every single one of you to eliminate just one thing from your daily life. And this will start you on a journey that will open your eyes to a whole new world of what sustainability looks like. I knew very little about anything when I started my journey, and I started by refusing a straw. I now do a lot of things, and my encouragement to you is whether it's a straw, whether it's bring your own cup for coffee, whether it's a refillable water bottle, whether you take it further into taking your own container when you go and get a takeaway. For women, looking at reusable menstrual products. For your hygiene care, looking at really good tooth products that are sustainable. There's really good stuff out there now. And I encourage you just to pick one thing. And if we all start to save, then together we can change the future. And hopefully we can walk on our beaches with our grandkids and start picking up shells again instead of litter. Imagine that.
And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much, Sarah, for a very, very informative talk. So just to start off and break the ice, so to speak, I would like to know from you, Sarah, what was your world record for the Guinness Book of Records?
I swam around Easter Island, that island with the plastic. I was the first person to do so in 19 hours and 8 minutes, 63.5 kilometers.
Well done. And then I'd like to ask Sarah, both you and Pavs. So Pavs, you're here next to me.
Sure.
What is your pledge to the ocean?
Well, I kind of dedicated my life to the ocean. I work at WWF South Africa. I run a strong SASSI program, and I'll continue running it. I'm a big advocate for the oceans. We have a fantastic marine program, so to continue working there. And when you have a purpose, the passion comes almost automatically. And keep talking to young people, encouraging them to become part of the challenge, walk the journey with us. It's their future we're trying to safeguard. So very much still working very hard. And I have a very strong focus around fishing communities, working with small-scale fishers, working with large fisheries to shift their practices to be more responsible. Sarah mentioned there's an issue with fishing nets. Fishing nets still fish. Ghost nets that are left still fish. People don't know that, and we haven't quantified the damage. So always working with an industry that is extractive and finding better ways of consuming seafood, finding better ways of how we engage with the ocean.
Thank you. Sarah, you explained your pledge. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I give all of my spare time. I give my life to the oceans as well. I think like Pavs, it's a passion. I don't get paid for what I do. I absolutely love it, and I'm prepared to give every spare minute and time that I have to it in terms of physically doing something like swimming, to advocating for oceans through speaking to schools, to having events where we can show how we can have plastic-free events. That's my pledge, as well as personally changing my own consumer behavior.
Yes. And spending almost the entire day in the ocean. So, as you touched on earlier, or like you said now, both of you said, we spoke about the youth. I think the new generation that's next is Gen Z, and both touched on that. So let me start with you, Pavs. If you could go back in time and see your younger self and tell her that today you're sitting here at your Oceans Aquarium, what did you say? And then what did you use from the lessons that you've learned for the youth today?
If I had to go back to my younger self, to be very honest with you, Aisha, I would say try harder. Don't sit back. I'm not too sure who said it, but there's a saying that says the worst thing you can do is to sit back and assume somebody else will fix the problem. I think be less complacent, actually, really add more drive and get more people, start that collective sooner. Get more ambassadors, get more warriors for the ocean, get them more involved, and also get people in South Africa always think of the ocean as consumption. And I think we need to be able to share with them that the ocean gives us so much more than just consumption. And almost, mobilize the youth to want to become Earth champions. And I think that's what I definitely ask my younger self to do. In terms of getting the youth, it's getting them to rally, be wonderful advocates. The youth are amazing. They're a force to be reckoned with. I always think, can you imagine if we had hashtag Fees Must Fall kind of campaign around the oceans, where we had so much fervor and passion and so much will and drive, but it was to do something with the seas. And that's what I encourage the youth to do, to be those champions, to be those voices, and to start seeing that we can shift the needle.
Yes, I think, yes, definitely. I just want to say anything to add to that.
Sorry. What's the question about going back to your younger self?
Yes, what did you tell your younger self? And then how did that lead into the youth of today?
I think for me, it's not necessarily around conservation, but just to be a little bit less serious about stuff. I took life very seriously when I was younger. I had a lot of fun as well, but I think in terms of my career as an athlete, just to relax a little bit and just enjoy it more. Remember why you started doing what you do, because you start doing it because you love it, and a lot of the time you get distracted by pressure from yourself or from society. And just to maintain your joy in why you started your thing. So maintain your passion.
While we just on that, Sarah, have you always been like a fitness fanatic?
Fitness fanatic. My mom would say yes. I have always been active. I used to swim competitively as a pool swimmer, so I've got that background, which has definitely helped me do what I do now in the oceans. But I've also had a fairly balanced life, but I did train many hours back in the day for many, many years.
And is fish a large part of your diet?
Fish, I really generally only eat fish that my friend's son spearfishes sustainably and legally. I don't really buy boxed fish and things like that. I'm quite selective.
Well done, Sarah.
Yes. I'm going to ask a question to you, Sarah, that whenever I tell my mom I'm going for a dive or a snorkel, my question is always, what about the sharks? So when you did your swim, was that in your thoughts?
When I started open water swimming, absolutely, I knew very little about the ocean. I'm a pool swimmer by tradition. Yes, I grew up in Cape Town, but we've got cold water there, and I wasn't really exposed to the ocean in terms of swimming in it. Playing in it, yes. And so when I decided I was going to do these kind of swims or attempt to do something like that, I knew nothing, and I had to literally start from scratch. So I spoke to experts. I went to the Sharks Board. I went on a shark dive in Aliwal Shoal and exposed myself to the sharks just to understand how to behave around them. And the more that I've encountered them and engaged with them and seen them and experienced them, the more I feel like it's such a privilege that if you do see a shark in the ocean, it's a privilege. It's letting you see it, because I know without a doubt that I've swum past thousands of sharks, but I've only seen a handful. And the ones that I've seen, they've kind of let me see them, and it's a huge privilege. And I think it's like you go on a game drive in the bush and you see a leopard, you're lucky to see that leopard. That's what it's like with sharks. They're very misunderstood.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that. So there's a comment from Professor Liesel van As, that's for you. In Bloemfontein, which is inland, in the Free State, we, the University of the Free State, incorporate SASSI in the zoology module.
That's fantastic.
So that is the Department of Zoology and Entomology. And students must download the SASSI app to participate.
Thank you, Prof.
That's another win.
That's a winner for us. And please know that if you need any information, any updates, just pop us an email and we will send it to you. So always willing to share whatever work SASSI is doing as well. So, it's part of what we do is to spread that awareness and understanding. So well done.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Okay, so this one is for you, Sarah, and this is from Sibyl. How far have we convinced South Africa and all African countries to join the High Ambition Coalition in the Global Plastics Treaty and support the turn off the tap of plastics production and consumption to save our planet, because there is no other solution, full stop. So I think I'm going to open to both of you. So,
I think Pavs can definitely answer that better. Our focus area is more on the public sector and changing from that level up rather than government. But I think Pavs is probably better positioned to answer that question better.
No, thanks, Sarah. So we have been very involved in the Global Plastics Treaty as WWF, both as a South African office, but also as a global organization. And we were making amazing strides with the plastic treaty until the last meeting. As soon as Trump did his tantrums and his tactics, we had most of the fossil fuel countries all of a sudden say they weren't happy with the draft. And that has set us back. So we were getting to a space where we actually had a draft. And I mean, there's actually a YouTube video where they ring the bell when there's been acceptance by a majority of the countries on that treaty. And as soon as the Trump antics started, most of the fossil fuel countries in the Arab states came back and said, we have the following issues with the draft. So it's kind of put us a little bit on a bit of a wobbly, and we're trying to get the treaty back on track. We have to get the treaty finalized. It's unequivocal. We have to get the treaty finalized. We have to get it signed. It would be the equivalent of the Paris Agreement for climate and the biodiversity agreement, the Kunming Biodiversity Agreement for biodiversity. The Global Plastics Treaty would be on that level. So it will be something that every country has to sign to be responsible for and put in those measures. So we have to get beyond this hurdle. And as soon as we do that, I think then that plastic treaty becomes something solid, UN-driven, nations-driven. But for now, unfortunately, as of a month ago, we've hit a speed bump.
So Bill, I hope that answers your question, and thank you for that answer, perhaps. We've got another question, and either of you can answer, and that is, how does microplastics affect humans?
You want to take that one, Sarah? Shall I jump in?
I think I alluded to it when I was speaking. There's a lot of evidence coming out that it impacts ADHD, autism, certain cancers, fertility issues. That's quite generic, but there's definitely evidence, and it's growing every day. There's more research coming out, and it's like we've got enough research. Now we need to change. That's my thought on it.
No, absolutely. And you're spot on. I mean, we've seen this gap in terms of microplastics in human health for many years. And all of a sudden, we're seeing this concertion in terms of verified, rigorous research that's actually showing that no, we're not just passing microplastics through our bodies, as everybody has said. It's starting to affect us. We're finding it in human fertility, which is a big problem. There's been a few cases of microplastics in placental cells. There's been a few cases of microplastic in gums, human being gums. We're definitely seeing it with some of the ADHD and the mental wellness issues, pregnant mothers. So it's only going to grow from here. We're not like mollusks, like mussels. We don't just store it and then it stays there, nothing happens to it. It's starting to affect us in terms of the quantity and the quantum that we are consuming. And microplastics are not just in water. Microplastics are in air, from the rubber in the tires. Microplastics are in the water, but also atmospheric microplastics. So they're more prolific than you think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sarah, that looks like you're going to say? You want to add to that?
No, just, I mean, they found it in the deepest part of the ocean and the highest part on Mount Everest. So it literally is everywhere. Yeah,
and I don't know if you know, Sarah, but there's a first species of zooplankton that actually is genus name is Plasticus, because they found microplastic in it in the Mariana Trench.
Oh, wow.
The first animal to have the word Plasticus, because it has embedded plastic into its body. It's a problem.
Wow. Sounds like plastic is competing with nematodes.
Pretty much.
Okay, Sarah, what has open water swimming taught you about yourself and life in general?
That's a very good question. I remember when I did my first channel crossing, which was in Hawaii in 2017, which was between Molokai and Oahu. It was a 58-kilometer swim. And that was, it was very, very tough, but also the best swim I've ever done. And I remember the lady who helped me through that at the end said, it's going to change you. And I was like, I don't feel that different. But as I look back, I definitely know it's changed me for sure. I've definitely become more passionate about protecting our ocean, but also just more resilient. Like, it makes you realize, you know, if I can do that and I can be uncomfortable for 18 hours, I can do it for longer. You know, I can do it again. I can get through other things that are uncomfortable. It's a difficult question to answer, but it definitely has changed me. It's ignited my passion even more, if that's even possible. And the more I do it, and the more I swim in the ocean and spend time in the ocean, the more I strive to protect it, and I'm prepared to literally risk my life for it. But on a personal level, it's definitely, it makes you question yourself. You have to dig deep. You have to really question why you're doing it and if it's really worth it. And for me, it is worth it, because as David Attenborough said, the ocean is our life, and it's more important than the land. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. And then trailing on that, we are going to end off soon. So what message do you want to leave everyone with?
Save. Remember to save. Otherwise, our motto for Breathe is to live deeply and tread lightly, and that's to really just live deeply means following your passions, find your dreams, do what you love, but tread lightly by being mindful of the environment, but mindful of the people in your life, because it's not an individual thing. I can't swim on my own. I have an incredible team of people that help me do that on and off the land. And I can't run my nonprofit. We can't fight this alone. We need people like Pavs. We work in collaboration with other organizations, and we can't just rely on nonprofits or on government or corporate. Every single individual has to work together to fight this problem.
Thank you, Sarah. Perhaps anything to add on to that?
No, I fully agree with Sarah. It's what we call a whole of society approach. It's not one group. It's not one government. You know, it has to start with everybody doing one small thing and changing one thing. We're not asking you to completely radically shift your lifestyle. We're asking you to change one small thing and get other people, encourage, show them that it's possible, and then work together. I mean, collaboration and partnerships is the only way we're going to do this. And then to remember, you can't have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. You can only have healthy people on a healthy planet, and that includes our seas.
Thank you, Perhaps. It's almost like I'm saying, you know, that we said that the forest is made up of many trees. Yeah, the ocean is made up of many little droplets.
Exactly.
I think it's a combined effort. And so with that, I want to again thank our speakers. Sarah Ferguson, thank you, world record holder, Guinness record holder. Paz, thank you both for the phenomenal talks tonight. Very informative from both of you. And our honorary SSA member, Shanette, I want to thank you also. Just want to come and say hi to everyone.
And squeeze your head in the screen.
If you're ever at the Oceans Aquarium. And then to the team behind the scenes here, you can't see them. But thank you all for joining us tonight.